Okay, what I'll do is I'll just invite our speakers to introduce themselves, short little bio, and then we'll get right into it. Starting over there with Travis.
Hello everyone, my name is Travis Hierman, and I'm a local author of many genres, including a horror western novel that just came out in September called Death Wind. There's the little thing at the cover. I'm having a launch party for it tomorrow night in room 415. We'll have snacks and drinks and books and things, so please come.
All right. Hello, I'm Christopher Catava. I also write several different genres. Currently published in high fantasy, but I have a near future psychological thriller that is complete and is actually in editing right now and prepared to jump out into the world and scare people. So.
Hi, I'm Amity Green. I am a local Colorado author, and I write dark fantasy and dark urban fantasy and horror mainly. I also write psychological horror. And yeah, I guess that's me in a nutshell. I had a release come out on the 31st of July that's called The Witcher Chime. And it's my first published horror novel, and I'm pretty proud of it. It's set here in Colorado, so if you like local history or any kind of the history about the mining district and things like that, I would suggest it, but make sure that you like horror too, because it's kind of heavy.
Yeah, I'm the moderator. My name is Mario Acevedo. It's my 10th anniversary with MileHiCon on this side of the table. How many people here, this is the first MileHiCon? Yeah.
I heard such a rookie.
Welcome. Okay,
Thank
this
you.
is great. It's one of my favorite cons. And the other thing is, I actually have a novel just came out, The University of Doom. It is not a horror novel. It's got zombies and monsters, but it's meant for laughs. Obviously, with the University of Doom. And I have some swag too, stickers and things like that. I also have some swag with Cyberworld. That's a novel that's coming out in November. I have a short story in it. They have a booth up in the vendor's room. And on Sunday afternoon, we have a panel. We're going to be talking about Sunday at 1 o'clock, the Cyberworld discussion and reading. It will be great. There's already been a lot of really positive buzz on it in the anthology, and please show up. And also everybody, be at Travis's party.
Yes.
I'm going to be there.
So I am.
I'll have booze, he's going to be there.
Yeah.
7 to 10 tomorrow night.
Okay. All right, so let's get started. The first question would be, okay, what makes, okay, how do you define horror? Because you mentioned psychological horror, and to me, I think every horror story is fundamentally a psychological horror story because it's you know, there's bad things happening, but it is the way that you draw the reader into experiencing the bad things that makes it a horror.
Right. For me, psychological horror, typically all of my psychological horror stories have human monsters because I find those to be the worst monsters out there. And
Such as a serial killer.
Yeah, they're all, you know, in your head when you're reading the story. So that to me is psychological horror rather than, you know, like zombies and that type of stuff. But that's just my short stories. The other stuff like demons or any other, you know, you can name a monster. I don't find that to be psychological horror at all, except when you were talking about defining horror, a horror is also an emotion, and I think that's probably why it's one of my favorite genres to write in, because words should evoke. And if your words don't evoke something, you're probably not writing it like strong enough, but it's so easy to scare people when you write in a genre that you're writing things you find are horrific to yourself. If you write that stuff, typically you're probably going to scare your reader as well. So I guess it's just an emotional thing with horror.
Somewhere along the same lines of what Amity was just saying is, I feel like there's different genres of horror. There's emotional horror, and then there's a mental horror, and that's where I go more with the psychological, where you're trying to outthink the adversary as you're reading, where the emotional is more, you know, a little bit more of the graphic, you know, right in your face. You have to, you know, fight or flight a little bit more like that. But, you know, so there is, to me, there's several different flavors of horror. You know, the blood and gore, I don't really find that to be as much horror for my own tastes as, to me, that's kind of like a roller coaster ride. You know, it's like an adrenaline rush, you know, and it's, you know, from the gut.
Right.
You know, and sometimes literally.
Well, you said like flavors of horror, and I'm thinking like type A, liver, spleen, you know.
Oh, man.
Travis?
I think horror, we call horror a genre because I think that's a marketing tool, right? So people know what sort of a book something is. But like Amity said, horror is an emotion that can fit into just about anything. My fantasy series has very strong horror elements. Obviously, I have a horror western now, the book that just came out, and there's science fiction horror. You can fit horror into just about any other genre, horror comedy, right? So I think that's sort of what we're talking about here, right? And something occurred to me while Amity was talking about human monsters, and that's in Stephen King's book Carrie. You know, we have the telekinetic girl who goes berserk and kills the whole school, but she's not the monster. I think the monster in that book is her mother.
And the other kids.
And the other kids, yeah. They are the ones that turn her into what she does. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, to me, the definition of horror was years ago. My first professional con was actually a Bram Stoker con in Elizabeth, New Jersey, which itself was its own little horror. There. I mean, it's a bad suburb of Newark, just to show you how bad it is. And when I was there, the Toastmaster was a man by the name of Tom Monteleone, who has written a lot of horror and screenplays, short stories, novels, and he's kind of like the reigning don, I guess, of horror in the literary world at the time. And he gave a speech about why he considered horror as the most legitimate of all literary genres. And the reason he said that is because you can't fake horror. For horror to work, it has to creep you out. And that's something you cannot fake. And that is something that's very difficult to write. It's easier to make somebody feel sad. It's easier to make somebody feel happy or make them laugh in a story, put jokes in. But to get people creeped out, in other words, to get them to feel the hairs rise on their arm, or to make them stop reading your book and wonder, are the doors locked? He goes, you cannot fake that response from somebody. You can go too far and it can be campy, and then it's no longer horror. So that made me really think more about the genre. So to me, that's what horror is. It has to creep you out. I write vampire novels, but I don't consider mine horror. And then once upon a time, any kind of a monster like a zombie or a vampire or anything like that was automatically made book horror. But since then, we've sort of the genres have split up, and now there's like urban fantasy, where the vampire, for example, in my case, is the hero, and I don't use that part to creep people out. So
I've got a quote here that's sort of along the lines of what Tom
Sure.
was saying, or what you were saying there about horror being sort of the ultimate, the ultimate expression. And, this is Joyce Carol Oates. Gothic horror fiction is a powerful vehicle for truth-telling because there is no wilder region for the exercise of pure imagination. Because I think only in horror are all stops removed.
right. Well, that brings me to another question, but we're going to get to that in a little minute. But it's a good one. So why do people want to get scared? I mean, if you want to creep people out, why do we want to do that? I mean, if we have somebody stalking us or something, something creeping us out, right? Or if we're, for example, we are in a parking garage, right? And then we kind of get the sensation that we're not alone there, or that somebody there, we perceive it as some kind of a threat to us, right? We get really creeped out. We don't like that at all, right? So why is it that we seek it for entertainment? So we will start with Christopher.
Okay, I think that there is, again, the different perceptions of the actual fight or flight, walking through the parking garage, seeing somebody, in a long cloak or something walking through there, that's real. I mean, there's like a real fear, and people want to be able to live on that edge in a safe space. Where, and again, you go back to the thrill rides, the roller coaster rides. It's like there's a whole line of people that have gotten on the ride before you, and you see they all survived and they came off, but you still want to go for that rush of adrenaline. And even though there is that difference of between that and the actual being under live fire or something like that. Yeah.
Travis?
I think, well, you stole what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. I was reading your notes.
Oh, okay. I think it has to do with, I think we are all attracted to that sort of vicarious thrill, right? Because it's visceral, like you were saying. You can get visceral reactions from romance as well, or from a good action scene. But I don't know, different people are attracted to different types of thrills. And horror is certainly one of those.
I feel horror is one of the strongest emotions that people can have, and I also feel that these days a lot of people are really, really bored. So when they seek something, to be, as far as entertainment goes, I think they're going to go for something that they feel is extreme, and horror is an extreme emotion. So I guess that's why other people like it. But I also feel that people don't really like to feel like they're in danger. They like to watch other people being in danger. So that's why they like to watch horror movies, because they know nothing's going to come out of the screen and get them. But they can experience this through the other characters. That's also why they read it. They can experience that horror, and that character is going through that horror, so they can live through through the character and get all the horror and still be in that safe space, just like Christopher was just talking about.
Unless you're watching The Ring, in which case the ghost does come out.
That one scared me. That one really scared me.
The vicarious experience of it. So what makes a good horror story? And is it atmosphere? Is it blood and gore? Is it suspense? What do you consider a good horror story? We'll start with you, Travis.
Okay. It's not blood and gore. Although, I suppose there's a certain segment of horror readership that enjoys that, just like they enjoy, torture porn like Hostel and the movies Hostel and Saw and just, but I wouldn't call that good horror. I would call it torture porn. But what makes it good, I think, is when you get that visceral reaction. And a good horror writer knows how to play with those emotions, and you can do that with being strategic with the things that you show and the things that you don't. You can do that with pacing. I think my favorite kind of horror story is when all the protagonists, all the good guys, do everything right. They're smart, they're resourceful, and they still get it. That's a good one. Because there's just way too many of the other kind, right? Where you have to have the woman fall down in the forest as she's running away for the plot to work. Sorry, no.
Or stay in the car. So you don't get out of the car. What are you doing? So I am a lot like Travis in respect to the kind of horror that I like. I do not like slasher stuff and blood and gore for no reason. I don't like that at all, just simply because it's for no reason. But it does have a place like in horror. It just has to be a result of the horror. It can't be the horror, like so splattery stuff and stuff. It just really doesn't do it for me and a lot of the people that I know too. For me, horror is a supernatural thing coming out through a human being. So we have The Ring. That was a really good example. That movie scared me, and it takes a lot, but that one did it. Poltergeist, the little girl. Anytime there is a kid having some sort of an interaction with a monster like that or something supernatural, that is scary to me.
That's one reason the Babadook worked.
Yeah.
You seen that?
Yeah.
That's a relatively new horror film that
Australia.
from Australia that did really well. And It's
Yeah.
exactly that, exactly that.
Also, animals. I was sad for Cujo because he got rabies, you know, and he was sick. So animals too, kids and animals, that for me is something that's especially scary and saddening at the same time. So I guess we're talking about different kinds of things that horror tries to get out of people. There's also going to be probably an element of sadness, you know, as an end result.
Christopher?
You know, I'm gonna kind of mirror these two, you know, the slasher films don't do it for me. I really like the psychological drama of the slow building suspense, which unfortunately seems, you know, to be a fading art in some ways, because everybody wants like the action from the get-go, you know, now in a lot of books, you know, so, but I like that slower developing, where you don't know who to trust, you know, things like that are, because you want to root for somebody, but if every time you start rooting for somebody, you see like another side of them a little bit, and then it's kind of like, well, can I trust this person? And then, you know, all of those, you go back to like the, you know, the old black and white, I mean, Alfred Hitchcock and things like that, you know, where that's what the whole genre was about at that time, was that slow build suspense, and I really enjoyed that. You know, I was at a writer's meeting just, you know, a couple of weeks ago, and in the background there was a horror flick playing, and I don't remember which one. It was somebody wearing somebody else's skin on it. I don't know. But you know, he's chasing the girl through throughout the movie, and there's like this towards the end of the movie, so the suspense is, you know, built as much as it's going to. He's chasing this woman for probably about 15 minutes, and it's high, you know, build tension. She gets discovered, she screams, she runs, she falls down. And, you know, for 15 minutes, she's just running, hiding, screaming. And I was like so much rooting for the killer. It was just like, just end it. I'm so sorry, tired of listening to this. So.
Yeah, that's the worst kind of word, is when you're hoping the bad guys win. You know, it's like, oh my God, I can't stand these people anymore, just kill them.
Yeah,
Just kill them.
Out of the gene.
Yeah, those are all good ones. I don't know, for me, well, I was going to say that, and I've said this to other panels, you know, being a dad kind of forces you always to be ready to confront bad things and having to be level-headed. So what really scares me would be things like water coming out of an electrical socket, because that tells me that's going to cost me a lot of money. That's pretty horrific, you know? You know, things like that. Or you're far away on the highway and your car starts making a weird noise. You're like, oh crap, how much is this going to cost me? You know, things like that.
And that's just the beginning, right?
Yes, it's just the beginning, you know. And you're like, that's the kind of stuff that scared me. But, you know, I have to think that there would be other, of course, horrific things. You know, children, you know, having your children, even when they're grown up, you never lose your attachment to them. And, you know, having to think about, you know, what you would need to do if something happened to them. And I was doing an assignment where I had to write a biography of, I think her name is Brittany Hamilton. She's that surfer that got her arm
Taken by a shark.
eaten by a shark. And it happened in a little lagoon, and she was with her friend, and her friend's father was there, and you know, they go paddling out to her, and the guy's there, and he knows, you can see the fin of the shark in the water. And he's like, if this shark attacks, we're all screwed. So he got the board, and he was ready to cut his arm and jump into the water and basically sacrifice himself to the shark so that the girls could get away. And it just so happens that the beach rescue showed up. And then the shark disappeared. So that was going through his mindset that, you know, this was what he was going to have to do, is basically shark eat me so these two girls can escape. And then I think afterwards probably he processed it like, holy crap, get eaten by a shark. Yeah. You know, well, you know, that's the kind of thing that happens. But the one book I read, and it wasn't really a horror book, but it was such a horrific scene that it actually made me stop reading the book for like a week to process it, was Altered Carbon, which was a science fiction book, where in this book the premise is that in the future they can download your consciousness. And I'm going to, spoiler alert for this part to it, but they could download your consciousness, and as long as they could do this, then they could move you from body to body, okay? And then the book really talked about those implications of it. And he did a fantastic job, very, very dark view of the world. And there's one part where the guy is caught by the bad guys, and he wakes up and he's in the body of a 15-year-old girl. And they're basically going to rape and torture him until he tells them what they need to do. But you know that they're not going to really kill him. They are just going to bring him, they're going to destroy that body and then just put him in another body and do it all over again. And they just bring you to that scene, and I'm like, holy crap, this is going to happen 300 years in the future. And it was just such a horrible thing that I had to put the book down and process this until I could, for a week, until I can go back and find out what happened. And to me, that was such a horrific thing. So I'm going to just open it up a little bit to the people in the audience to say, is there anything, what do you figure is something really horrific for you? But yet you go to, that you want to read, or a movie or something. Anybody want to? Yes.
Cosmic horror stories are like some of my favorite. They're absolutely terrifying, like H.P. Lovecraftian horror.
Oh, okay.
You're struggling against something that doesn't even realize you exist and could just shrug its shoulders, and everything you know and love is just wiped out of existence.
It's the indifference that's scary.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love about Lovecraft is there's no safety net.
There is zero safety.
When you have a vampire story, there's always daylight and wooden stakes. When you have a werewolf story, there's wolf's bane and silver. And you know, so in zombie story, you get shotguns, right? You don't get any of that.
What do you do against it?
There's nothing that you can do, right? And that is just terrifying.
Yeah, the helplessness.
Anybody else? Yes.
Body horror like The Fly just totally creeps me out.
Like the what?
What?
Body horror like The Fly,
The Fly. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
where it's
Yeah.
your body is changing, which you know is part of everybody's life, but exaggerated to a point where it's just utterly horrific.
You know, the worst part of that movie for me is when it came out and he sat on or maybe it was a girl who sat on the park bench at the very end of the classic movie, and there was like a little fly sitting down on the, and he's like, "Hey," like this, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's terrible. So that was the worst part of that whole movie for me. It was the little itty bitty person fly. Oh my gosh.
The worst body horror I've ever seen is the Human Centipede.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
God.
Oh, yuck. Just
They
yuck.
made 3 of those movies.
Right.
I know, and people are still watching and they're just yuck.
Anybody else have one? Yes.
Well, I had to stop watching zombie horror after I started going to a support group for people who were caregiving for people with dementia. And there's that space, you know, in zombie movies where somebody's been infected but they haven't told anybody yet, and you don't know when they're going to lose enough of their person that you're going to have to kill them. You know, all of that just I can't do right now.
So would you be more afraid of yourself losing your mental faculties or someone that you loved? What is the bigger worry for you?
I think for me it's myself, because I spend a lot of time in my own head.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's precious space to lose that.
I agree.
All right. So what line should not be crossed? Is there a line that should not be? What?
Probably kids again, you know, or like, I got really scared. Gosh, I was reading something, I thought somebody was gonna kill and eat a baby, and I can't remember. I was just like, nope, I'm done. I can't even remember what it was, but it was a long time ago. So yeah, for me, torturing animals or torturing small children, you can get your point across and scare people good ways. That's just wrong.
Travis?
I don't think there were lines.
You don't think there are any lines?
If there are, and maybe there are. It's something I struggle with because, I mean, Deathwind is a pretty, it doesn't go well for some of the kids. So,
Note to self.
I mean, I think as horror, I mean, that's part of like being a horror writer is you gotta look into that abyss. And I don't know, if you're not creeping yourself out, if you're not getting yourself a little bit upset or icked out, then the reader's not gonna go there either. So, yeah, I don't know. I would say that there shouldn't be any rules that there are lines. Let me say it that way. But, you know, everybody's got their own boundaries, obviously, so.
That's where I was going.
What's that?
Good lines, think one.
Yeah. For me personally, I mean, there's lines that I won't read, you know, simply because it's like, I don't want that in my consciousness. But as far as a writer, I don't think there should be any rule that can't be written. Because there's somebody out there, I mean, I can't judge everybody else just on what my personal limits are. So, you know, there shouldn't be any limits to what I write. But as far as, you know, and of course, for me personally, to be able to write something that goes beyond my own line, that would be a challenge, you know. But I'm certainly not going to tell anybody else, that's gone too far, because there's other people that can handle it. You know, we're all, everything we read, everything we like, everything we fear is all based on our own personal experiences growing up and you know, interacting with society now as adults. So everybody's got a different handle on, you know, what they can handle in life and what other people can't.
It just occurred to me, like, where are some, I was been thinking about lines, right? There's just a mind-bogglingly awesome story by Joe Lansdale called Night They Missed the Horror Show. Anybody here familiar with that one? Oh my God, it's like a punch in the face. It's about these two racist rednecks in East Texas. And I don't know how to do it. It's funny, and yet by the end of it, you're going, "What the hell did I just read?" And it's he just has this way of cranking up the tension, where you think, you know, there's these two rednecks, and you know, and then there's this whole racist storyline where they run across this the young black quarterback of the local football team, who's being, you know, abused by some other racists, and they're like, no, he belongs to us. We're the only ones who get to abuse him, right? So, and then the three of them sort of encounter people that are even worse, and then it's just straight off to the deep end. And so, yeah.
He grew up in East Texas, and so a lot of those
Yeah.
stories actually come out just because they're like old tales, you know, and stuff that he grew up with, because he grew up, you know, with a lot of racism and stuff in East Texas. There's a lot of that stuff that still just is rampant. And Joe Lansdale last year had, one of his stories was picked up and made into a TV show, and it's called It Happened Leonard, I believe. And I highly suggest just about anything again has ever written. I met him at World HorrorCon in 2012, and he is a charming, very intelligent guy. And I learned a lot from him just going to his panels and stuff, but I highly recommend reading his stuff.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites. Like he's kind of my idol, I think. Yeah.
He's just
He writes in a bunch of different genres, but mainly crime, noir, and horror. So yeah, Happen Leonard is good. Yeah, just about anything you can pick up by him is amazing.
Yeah, I don't believe there's lines either, because life doesn't respect those lines, you know, and
Look at the world right
Yeah.
now. We can't, like, we normal sane people can't make this shit up. You know, so.
So give an example of something that worked really well for you, either a movie or a book or a short story or something, and then one that didn't work so well, and it kind of makes you mad that people thinks it does. So, Christopher.
As far as what works, I would go with things like The Shining. You know, then, you know, there's things, there's qualities to it that, you know, still to this day, you know, I'm not going to sit in the dark room watching that on TV or, you know, and let's see, Amityville Horror, I remember the first time I was reading that, and, you know, having that experience of, I was laying on my bed reading the book, you know, I was laying on my stomach, and all of a sudden, you know, I just got that feeling that there was something behind me. And so it was like, and then, I mean, that creeped me out, but at the same time, it was like, you know, I was getting a big payoff on the investment at that point. It was like, you know, I bought my ticket for the ride by, you know, buying the book, and I was getting, you know, a good experience, a level of experience, you know, out of it. As far as things that don't work, you know, don't mean to beat a dead horse, but any of the slasher stuff, it just doesn't, you know, it doesn't really pan out to me, so.
What works for me is It. I read It. Started reading it when I was like 7. Still to this day, clowns have set me off. You know, Pennywise. I used to, when I was little and I was reading this book, we got this cat, and I really wanted to name this cat Pennywise, and I don't know what the hell was wrong with me. But my mom said, no, we're not naming the cat Pennywise. And so yeah, that works. As far as movies go, like I said before, anything that's a supernatural entity coming out through a human, so some sort of a human transformation, kind of like you brought up The Fly. I watched a movie called The Beast Within when I was 14. Has anybody seen The Beast Within? Oh my gosh, it was about this big critter, the insect thing that had this spawning period, and it would like it would actually rape a woman, and then the woman would have a baby, and then like when the baby turned like 18 or something like that, it was the baby's turn, the 18-year-old's turn to actually be this monster thing, if I'm remembering it right. I don't know, I was scared out of my mind. So that one worked really well. Stuff that doesn't work for me is horror. You know, they call it horror, but it's not really, it's just they're trying to be gross like our friend the human centipede. So that doesn't work.
Travis?
Well, I already mentioned Lansdale. I think you can pick up just about anything by him and be satisfied. Not all of it's horror, but this short story that I mentioned certainly is. And I was thinking John Carpenter's The Thing has got to be one like pretty close to the pinnacle of horror, not movies for me. I watched it a few months ago. It's like, wow, that movie still holds up. You know. As far as stuff that doesn't work, I've been sitting here trying to think about it. But I mean, we got slasher. I mean, it's boring. Yeah, that's it. Slasher stuff. Like I mentioned before, the torture porn stuff. I mean. Yeah, Saw had an interesting premise, at least.
Yeah.
But then very quickly devolved into like, okay, how inventive can we be to torture and kill people?
Right.
So
It's a good human monster.
yeah.
Exotic, all the
Silence of the Lambs is, you know, is a good human monster.
Yeah, and human centipede. I almost couldn't finish watching it. I mean, like, God. Are you familiar?
Yes.
And you're not familiar and want to know? No? Okay.
All right, are you going to run towards them here now?
To me, different things. I think one of the scariest stories I've ever read, it's in an anthology called Science Fiction Terror Tales. And it's been out of print for years, and actually went on Amazon, and somebody somewhere has it. Paperback book, I bought it. I bought my copy a long time ago. Well, when I had it when I was in high school, I went to one of those, you know, used paperback stores where you buy one for like 15 cents or something. and I read this, and that story's in a couple stories by Philip K. Dick, and I don't know who had this story, but it's I'm gonna give it away, but it's about this planet of robots, and a spaceship crashes, lands on it, and they're communicating with what they think is a robot inside, and then the robot inside is saying, they're telling the robot to move to a place where they can cut the ship open and rescue it, and the robot inside said it can't move because it's in pain. So they tell it to shut down its pain receptors, and it can't do it. So they tell it to move, it gets into the airlock, and then they go and they use some kind of a cutting laser or something, and this thing starts telling them that they're harming it, and it's in pain, and they're like, we don't understand, shut yourself down. And then we get through this, and then we revive afterwards. And then this thing starts screaming, and then they cut it open, and there's nothing there except there's this smoking mass that they think is insulation. And at that point you realize, of course, it's an astronaut that was in this thing. And they had no clue because they had lost memory of humans. And they were freaked out by it because they knew they had communicated with what they thought was an intelligent robot. And they're going through the shuttle, and there's nothing there that could provide that level of intelligence. So where did this thing come from? So the robots are creeped out, you know. And I'm thinking, this poor guy is in the airlock being burned alive, and he's screaming at them, and they're like, well, just turn yourself off. Just turn yourself off. So I thought that was a really good story. I love good crime stories. And, you know, I love, like we had talked about, you just can't make that up. And one of my favorite ones, a long time ago, I had to do like a murder tour of Denver, and it was a guy by the name of Bill Cody, who lived out in Littleton. And he was this kind of guy. He was, I guess the old term would be a ne'er-do-well. You know, really wasn't much. And what he would do is he would scam women into these fantastic stories, and they would loan him money, right? But they would never pay him back. And he worked out this thing where, you know, he had all kinds of stories that he was on the run from the mafia, but one of the mafia dons was helping him out. Or another one was that he had won the lottery, like for millions of dollars, and but they hadn't paid off yet. And he would ingratiate himself to these middle-aged women and that, and then they got wise to him, and some of them ended up turning him into the police. So the circle was shrinking around him, and what he did is he took a couple of women. He had a condo out in West Littleton, and one of the women he had kidnapped, and then I don't know if he had drugged her or not, and he took the hood off her head, and she was duct taped to a chair, and he killed another woman he had this other woman tied to a mattress, and then he took off the top of the hood on her pillowcase, whatever, and there was another woman that was duct taped to a chair, so they used an axe, and he killed her. And this other woman, for some reason, let the other woman live. And she described that thing, and then where they hit her on the head with the axe, and the woman fell over, and he said the blood spilling out of her brain pan sounded like it was sloshing in a pan. It was just so horrific, and you're like, wow, people really are sick, you know. And then the guy ended up suicide by cop kind of thing in the end, you know. But that kind of horrific stories just to me is like, wow, what? Because it really happened, you know, and you're wondering about the people living around you and how they can cause that. So does anybody want to go ahead?
I got a great example of that.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Jack Ketchum's book, The Girl Next Door. Is anybody familiar with that? Oh my God. The ultimate human monster. In that, so it's based on a true story. That he had to tone down, that Ketchum had to tone down for the novel, right? So basically this woman in suburbia, I think it was Indiana, but I'm not sure, in the 60s, basically formed this cult of personality with all the neighborhood boys. She was a middle-aged woman, and so all these boys would come over to her house for ice cream, beer, and cigarettes, right? So, and she sort of became this ringleader. And then her two nieces came to live with her, and she hated the oldest one. And eventually, she and these boys are all complicit. And they're from like 12 to 16. She imprisons this 16-year-old girl in her basement, and they all torture her for months. Yeah, I don't want to give it all away, but that's the story. That's the story, and Ketchum turned this into a really just harrowing novel. It's like one of two novels that I've read in one sitting.
And yet we read them as horrific as they are.
Right. I couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
It's the point of view as a 12-year-old boy. So that makes the reader complicit in what's going on, right? And that's it's just.
I actually cried when I read that book.
I can't. Yeah.
And there's also another one that he wrote called Red. If you like that kind of human monster story, Red is good. And also he co-authored another one called I'm Not Sam, and that is straight up psychological horror. Has anybody read I'm Not Sam by Jack Ketchum? It's basically about a girl who has some sort of inciting event, and she goes back to being a 6-year-old, and she's married to a man, and it's pretty much through his point of view, as he has these breakdowns as his wife is just living as a 6-year-old. And oh my gosh, it's so good. Jack Ketchum is amazing. He's really good, but he is so scary.
He doesn't have a lot of books, but boy, everything he's got is just gangbusters.
It's scary, scary stuff.
Anybody want to share a favorite horror story or movie or whatever? Yes, sir.
Mine's a game, actually. It's a visual novel, so it's basically a book, like a choose your own adventure book on computer, stuff like that.
Choose your own.
Yeah, choose your own horror adventure. It's called Song of Saya. And it's a bit of a cosmic horror and psychological horror story, where you're following a character who can't perceive the world as a person anymore. Like, he perceives it in the most horrific way you could possibly imagine. His sight, his sound, his sense of touch, and his taste is all distorted to the most disgusting things imaginable. And the only person he can only see like one person as human. And you just follow him in this story as the whole experience around him just turns him more and more into a human monster. And spoiler alert, the one person that he sees as human isn't human at all.
Wow.
I thought you were going to say Silent Hill.
There's some really great horror games out there.
Corpse Party, for example.
Oh yeah, that
Corpse Party? Okay.
that one's alright, yeah.
Yeah, it just came out on 3DS.
Yeah, zombies.
What?
No,
What's
it's
the-
not
it's
zombies.
not zombies?
It's
No.
ghosts.
There's one where you shoot clowns too. Like.
Okay.
That was way up there.
There's a whole new phenomenon in horror that I've become really fascinated with lately, and there's a lot of good in it and there's a lot of bad in it, so it's kind of a mix, but it's a thing called copypasta, or creepypasta, I should say. And it comes from the idea of copying and pasting stuff onto a thread, usually on something like Reddit or 4chan. And these people come up with sort of a community-built story. Like somebody will say, hey, do you remember that creepy children's show? You know, and they start talking about a creepy children's show that probably didn't exist. But like 5 or 6 people will help write this tale, and it can get incredibly spine-tingling, which I love that kind of stuff. So if anybody who's not aware of creepypasta and likes to read creepy stuff, go check it out.
I've heard the term, but I never knew what it was. So, okay.
Well, I've got a couple. Turn of the Screw, and I've watched a couple movies on it that I can't watch before I go to bed at night. There was also the Night Gallery where Elsa Lancaster played an old woman. They cut her finger off, she buried her finger, and then she grew back out of where she buried her finger. I can never watch that one again at night. And then when I was a kid, which is the thing that got me cut off from watching anything horror, there was a show I watched about a scarecrow terrorizing the countryside. I woke up that night screaming because that scarecrow was standing at the foot of my bed. Lights were on, he's standing at the foot of my bed bleeding. I started screaming and my mom said, that's it, no more. No more Night Gallery, no more Twilight Zone. No, I couldn't even watch the creature features on Saturday afternoons for years. She wouldn't let me.
Have you seen Jeepers Creepers?
No, I've not seen it.
Oh my gosh, some of those are really funny. I mean, it's not like totally scary or something because I feel he has a great sense of humor. And then Pumpkinhead. I think you would really like Pumpkinhead.
Well, there's a whole Scarecrow series, right, and they're pretty bad. They're on the C list. They're not even a B movie.
Well, so this was something that I watched when I was like 7 or 8 years old, and the whole thing was the scarecrow gets his arm shot off. When they find him back on his pole, there's a bone sticking out and there's blood running out of it. And I have no idea what it was called. I thought it was the Scarecrow of Romney Marsh. I saw it out later on. It's like, no, this is not it. But yeah, it's like I said, screaming, woke up screaming with that thing standing at the foot of my bed.
Any more? Any more scary? I know you guys like scary stories. Give us, yes, Miss.
There's one that isn't scary so much as it's horrific, and it kind of is along the lines of the gentleman over there who is going to the groups
Right.
with dementia. It's called Maggie, and it has the Schwarzenegger in it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's his daughter gets bitten. It's a zombie film, and his daughter gets bitten, and it's all about his struggle as she is turning slowly, and all of the people around her, because they're rounding up everybody, and so I found that very sad, but this is going along with children and animals, where adults, yeah, kill them all, okay, that's fine, they make their choices, but children and animals don't have choices. They're being controlled by everything around them, so I found that one really sad and scary in that respect. And then there was The Wailing, which is one out of South Korea. I watch a lot of horror movies from other countries to try and understand different cultures, and it brought in Christianity, Buddhism, and shamanism all in one movie. It was very interesting.
Wow.
I mean, there was some standards, like gloomy days and rain and some sadness and horror, but some basic environmental archetypes. But it brought in some other things which allows you to look into another culture, what they find horrific, as opposed to just American splatter. So.
That's a good point. You can learn a lot about a culture by learning what scares them, right?
Okay.
Yeah, the Koreans are doing, Koreans and Japanese are doing some really bang up horror stuff. Yeah.
All right.
The host is
Rain in
over
the
there.
Grunge.
The
Or,
host, yeah,
or
that
Three
was-
Extremes.
I don't know if
That series of movies.
Which one?
Three Extremes. It's worth it. There is a short film in there called Cut, which takes all the promise that Saw should have had and actually fulfills it. And it's done by Park Chan-wook, who did Lady Vengeance, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, Old Boy, those types. It's pretty good.
Yeah, the Japanese are much more, I think, about pulling out all the stops, because there's, you watch some of the, like, the director's name escapes me, but he did a Masters of Horror episode from that series on Showtime that actually got banned.
It got banned?
Yeah,
Wow.
it got banned. You could buy the DVD, but it never aired.
Wow.
And he's done quite a number of horror movies, and they're just if you don't think they're going to go there, yeah, and they might go 10 feet further. So
Is the director Takeishi Maiki?
Well, anyway,
Oh.
yes,
we're at
Mike is the director.
we're at the end of our time, so thank you very much. This is for coming to our panel. I got some swag here, stickers, Cyber World stickers, and Cyber World cards, and Elvis stuff, and University of Doom stickers for your car. Awesome. It's by the Karma. You will win the lottery. I guarantee it. You win the lottery if you if you get one of my University of Doom stickers, you win the lottery. I don't know when, but you will. All right, so thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, panelists. That was great.